Chapter 15, Aruba. Jade awoke to Alejandro's leg thrown over her, and she could hear his steady breathing as he was lost in sleep and dreams. Her mind was bleary from everything that had happened in the past days, but she was committed to this vacation they had planned late into the night between bouts of lovemaking and amaretto sours. She went downstairs to make them breakfast, and as she was putting the coffee on, there was a knock on the door. Jade wrapped herself in a pool towel and went to the door to find Jenny standing there. "Jenny, how are you?" Jade thought Jenny was coming by to talk about her evening, but she wasn't prepared for what came next. "Come on in, hun," she said, leaving the door open and going back to her coffee making. "So how was your evening?" she said, knowing full well how it must have been. "Jade, what are you doing?" Jenny said, concerned about the fact that Jade seemed utterly oblivious to what was happening, and this always triggered Jenny. "I'm making coffee. Want some?" Jade said, pulling out an extra cup. "Jade, I'm not talking about coffee. I'm talking about Alejandro. What happened to Rob and your date?" If there was anything at that moment that Jade didn't want to think about, it was Rob. She only wanted to live in the excitement of getting out of town and forgetting about all that. She wanted freedom and lovemaking and lightness of the beach in a far-off place. She didn't want to think about work or anything else. "Jenny, you know we're just friends. I told you the other day. There's nothing between us," Jade said, feeling a strange tightness in her heart. Jade was all Jenny could say because she knew full well what was going on here. But she also knew from working with so many clients that were in denial that there was nothing she could do to change their thoughts or their minds. She couldn't control their actions, and she definitely couldn't change the course of someone's free will choices. Oh, but how she wanted to try here. This was Jade, one of her best friends, and she was sitting here watching her in complete denial about her feelings and losing herself yet again in a poor decision that was going to affect not just her, but Alejandro and Joaquin, and who knows what else. These were the times that Jenny got frustrated with her gifts, to see and understand so much more than most people could only dream. "Alejandro and I are going to Aruba for a while. We're leaving today, Jenny. I thought you should know just in case," Jade said, singing a song that was starting to form in her head. "I'm happy, Jenny. I really am. There's no need to worry about me." "Jade, please tell me what happened with Rob. I'm concerned about him. If anything, do it for Rob and your friendship with him." "I can't go there right now, Jenny," Jade said, recalling the electricity, the touch of Rob's hand, and the feeling when Sky entered her world and ended all of that by trying to control her life yet again. Just then, Alejandro appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Good morning, love. I heard voices. Is everything okay?" he said, noticing that the conversation seemed tense. "Jenny, buenos dias. Are you joining us for breakfast?" Jade, who was starting to go to a place she didn't want to, was relieved to see him. She moved towards him, and he caught her in a huge hug and twirled her around in a circle, lost in her embrace and the feel of her body against his. He set her down and moved to get a coffee mug. "I was just telling Jenny that we're going on vacation," Jade said, feeling lighter again as she went to the fridge to pull out organic almond milk for the coffee. "I'm good," Jenny said. "I have a phone call to make. Have a great time on your vacation, you two," was all she could bring herself to say. She hugged them both and left before she could say anything more. She didn't know what to say or think when she saw them together like that. She felt a feeling of superficialness coming from one of them and confusion from the other, and she had no control over how fate played its hand. Jenny returned to her apartment and tried to call Rob, but her call immediately got forwarded to voicemail. She sighed and left a message. "Rob, it's Jenny. I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about you. I wanted to let you know I don't typically call clients like this, but I'm concerned about you. I know something happened between you and Jade, and she's my friend, and I just feel a little bit more involved than usual here. Please call me, Rob. I might be able to help," she said, ending the call. Back in the main house, Jade and Alejandro drank strong coffee and ate toast with her homemade jam. They laughed like kids as they mopped up the jam with toast pieces and got their fingers sticky as jam spilled on the table and got on their faces. They were like kids who didn't care about anything but playing and having fun. Jade felt content, and she intended to keep it that way. I'm going to go pack for us. We can buy whatever we don't have, she said, knowing he wouldn't want to go home to pack with Joaquin waiting there for him. I'm going to call Joaquin, he said matter-of-factly. He knew that Joaquin would not be happy with this news and most likely would head back to Mexico as soon as he heard, but he was willing to risk it for this time with Jade that he had only imagined would happen in his dreams. Jade moved upstairs to pull down luggage and call for her charter pilot to get ready for Aruba that afternoon. She had everything planned in her head, but her thoughts were interrupted by Alejandro, who moved up behind her and buried his head in her neck. His call with Joaquin didn't go well, and he was left feeling a little guilty. It's all set, he said, holding her close. Feeling her like this made him forget the argument he had just had. She turned around to face him. You're upset, she said, noticing he seemed sad. Well, we can fix that, she said, moving her hands over his body. Don't be upset, darling, she said, nibbling his ear. And he was overtaken with her again as he pulled her onto the furry carpet by the bedroom fireplace. Oh, Jade, you shouldn't make me like this, was what she thought she heard him say softly as she let herself get lost in him. When they were like this, she had only to fly in her mind to the heights of ecstasy that he was able to elicit in her. She didn't have to think about anything else. He didn't want to know about her feelings, or if she loved him, or even liked him. He was content to hold her, and she was content to fold herself into him with no strings attached. They showered and finished packing, and then Alejandro drove them to the airport. Jade knew she needed to let her manager know where she was going, but she figured that could wait. Kestrel was on hiatus, and they didn't have a tour planned until early next year. The band had spent the better part of this past year in the studio working on the new album, so Jade felt she deserved this time off. She didn't need to explain herself to anyone. She also didn't care at this point if anyone saw her and Alejandro together like this. She especially hoped that everyone knew that she was happy and well cared for, and that included Rob Strom. She didn't want there to be any question that she was in a relationship now and not available to anyone. Hours later, the charter jet landed in Aruba, and a limo driver was waiting for them on the tarmac. Alejandro had already called ahead to reserve them a secluded beach bungalow, even though Jade might have preferred to be closer to the nightlife. By the time the limo made it to their hotel, several people had already spotted Jade and had posted about it on social media. In fact, Jade herself had tweeted that she was going to be... can you still tweet? Yeah. She tweeted back then. Had tweeted that she was going to be off the grid in the Caribbean and that she was not alone. Jet-setting paparazzi were already making their way to the small island in hopes of catching a shot of the saucy songstress on the beach and in the arms of someone special. Once they checked in, Jade wondered what they should do next. Let's go swimming, hun, she said, as she was unpacking their bags. We can go for some things for you tomorrow. I know it's late, but I want to enjoy the moonlight on the beach. She didn't get an answer and came out to find him asleep on the couch. Oh, poor dear, he's had a busy few days, she thought, as she covered him with a blanket. Well, that didn't stop her from enjoying the night without him. Their bungalow was right on the sand, so it didn't require much in the way of preparation. She didn't think anyone would be around so late, so she removed her clothes, wrapped herself in a towel, and stepped out onto the sand. She felt alive and free, and the small sliver of a moon overhead made the stars seem even brighter. She allowed the surf to take her out to where she could swim a little easier, and then she floated on her back looking up at the sky. This was paradise, and she had everything she could need or want right here. After a while, she swam in and went inside. Alejandro was awake and looking at his cell. They already know you're here, pet, he said, concerned. I don't want to spend my time chasing off those camera guys. I thought we were off the grid. We are, but I just had to post that I was going to be out of touch. It's no harm done. We're too sly for those guys anyway, she said, reminded of the time they had been chased from the Vegas casino that Kestrel was playing at, and Alejandro had driven like mad to get away from them. He had finally lost them by slipping into a crowded limo parking area. She couldn't deny that sometimes she liked living on the edge. She was starting to feel sleepy, and she wanted to spend all day tomorrow playing around the island, so she made her way into the bedroom. "I'm sleepy. I think I'm going to lay down. Are you coming, love?" she said, dropping her towel to the floor. They woke the next morning to the surf outside. Alejandro called room service to get them breakfast, and hot coffee, fruit, and an island treat of Johnny cakes were promptly delivered, along with a floral arrangement. The card was made out to Jade, courtesy of the hotel manager, thanking her for staying with them. "Well, isn't that sweet?" she said as she put them on the coffee table. She made a plate for each of them and settled in to drink coffee and check social media on her phone. As she was scrolling through Instagram, she saw something that made her heart fall. She didn't know why, but the picture of Rob Strom swooning over two blonde groupies at the Tahoe Hard Rock made her feel so sick to her stomach that she had to quickly move outside to the veranda to breathe. Chapter 16, Hard Rock Nights. Back in Tahoe, Rob and Steele had settled in by enjoying the company of Tamara and Megan for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Rob knew that pictures of him and the entourage were being snapped by well-meaning fans, but he didn't seem to care, as the alcohol had been flowing since they had checked in, and he was feeling good. As the weekend passed, they spent their time visiting the various musician hangouts in the area. Steele had all the connections and took them around to the secret spots that only the locals and well-versed visitors knew about. They spent Sunday on a private, secluded lakefront beach around a small bonfire as the late September breeze swirled around them, kicking up little sparks in the fire. The girls wanted Rob and Steele to skinny dip with them in the lake, but the two were having none of it, not being that fond of a cold water rush that might sober them up a little too much. Rob thought he was having a good time. It seemed so, but what he didn't recognize is that he was only using all these activities, the drinking, womanizing, and hard living, to stifle and drown out feeling anything real at all. It was something he had done ever since he was a child, but it had been so commonplace it felt normal to him. Steele was a little more in touch than Rob and recognized these tendencies in his friend, but at the same time he wanted his best friend to have fun, so he let Rob push his limits more so than Conrad or Murray might have. Tamara and Megan only cared about the fact that a well-known musician had luckily seen them and wanted to hang out with them. They were going to have so many pictures and stories to tell their friends. Oh, and wouldn't it be cool if Rob or Steele fell for one of them? They could become the wife of a wealthy rock star. As the day wore on to dusk, Megan and Rob snuck away to get to know each other better. As was his style, Rob, who really was a tender and caring person, got anxious talking to girls. He didn't like to talk about feelings. And a lot of the time, he had to admit he only wanted to get physical. The release it brought was the only type of intimate love he had ever really known. And so without too many words other than the ones that brought girls to their knees, he spoke about his admiration for their body and their looks and how he wanted to experience them. He was an experienced partner, but not very good at feeling into the act of lovemaking. There was passion, but it was only about body into body and not much beyond that. And then afterward he felt awkward and he didn't have a whole lot to say. So girls got what they came for, but not much more. Thus all these affairs were obviously short-lived, which was just how he thought he liked them to be. But something was tugging at his heart. There was someone who he loved being around and speaking genuinely to about his feelings and thoughts. And he loved hearing her stories and ambitions. And then there was the electricity between them. He quickly brushed the vision of Jade's face aside as he straddled Megan and focused on her heavy breathing and her hands on his tight body. He felt her caressing his hair as she breathlessly moaned his name, pulling him against her. When they were done, he moved off of her, and they sat motionless for a moment. Rob offered her his flask, which she drank from, and then handed back to him, which he accepted, finishing it off. "Thanks, love, you're beautiful," was all he could manage to say as he pulled his clothes back on and made ready to head back to the fire. Megan was left to figure the rest out for herself, but she couldn't have been happier, thinking and expected that surely now the star was utterly taken with her. Steele had been having his own intimate moments with Tamara by the fire, and they scurried to dress as Rob approached. "What do you say we hit up the band at the Hard Rock?" Steele said, ready to add some more heat and adrenaline to the party. "I hear they're dying to get you up on stage," he said to Rob. "I'm in," Rob said. "I need to start practicing for the tour anyway," he said, feeling a little lightheaded. "What do you say we pick up some food on the way? I'm starved." They packed up the car with their blankets and made their way back into town, stopping at a local burger place, the Burger Joint, to load up on Hangover Helper burgers. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Hangover Helper burgers and cheese fries. Yum. The young cashier happened to notice that it was Rob Strom and asked for a quick selfie with the star. And so yet more pictures were posted to social media tagged with Rob's name. A while later, Rob got a text from Conrad. "Hey, Murray's concerned about you. Can you keep it down a little until the tour starts?" The text was apparently alluding to his behavior and all the social media attention he was receiving since getting to Tahoe. Rob's behavior also wasn't lost on Jade, who had caught her breath enough to decide to stir up some attention of her own. For some strange reason, the thought that two could play that game came into her head. She went back inside to find Alejandro on the phone with what had to be Joaquin. "No, love, it's nothing like that," he said quietly into the phone. "Why don't you believe me? Jade and I are..." He switched to quick-spaced... I can't even say it. He switched to quick-spaced Spanish, and the rest of the conversation was lost to her. She passed by him towards the bedroom, looking back at him over her shoulder as she did. He held up one finger, telling her he wouldn't be much longer, which in a sense infuriated her. She decided they were going to make some social media magic of their own that would send a clear message to all the Robs and Joaquins that they were obviously so much more than friends, and then that would settle it, and she would have her power back again. She emerged from the bedroom in a gold G-string bikini that showed every curve of her fabulous body. She walked over and sat on Alejandro's lap as he continued to more dejectedly now keep Joaquin soothed. Alejandro's attention came back into the room at the feeling of her body on his. "I've got to go now. We can talk later," he said, quickly ending the call before he could become entangled in the conversation again. Jade touched his body in such a way that he immediately became aroused, as was the way that her energy came over him. He wasn't sure how he had kept himself from her for so long, just being her bodyguard, watching her turn her attention to other men, using him for rides and as the hired muscle to keep all the others from having her. For a moment, his propensity to become jealous of her took him over, and then he let it pass. She was here with him, wasn't she? Evidently, she must care for him more than that. "Are you ready for the beach?" she asked, jumping off his lap, ready to go out and make some media magic. She grabbed him by the hand, and he rose up to meet her. He looked at her, not sure what her intentions were in that swimsuit. She looked like a goddess to him, and he had to stop himself from pulling her down onto the couch. He didn't look so bad himself, he thought. I mean, he was ripped and tanned, and his long blonde hair fell over his muscular shoulders, and here he was with one of the most famous pop stars in the world right now. He counted himself lucky to be in her arms, yet a part of him also felt bad about lying to Joaquin. He knew Joaquin loved him deeply. Joaquin was always telling him how much they were meant to be together. Alejandro felt this too. However, as soon as he got around Jade, he would often forget it. What did this say about him? What about his fidelity and the ability to honestly have a serious relationship? These were all the things and more that Joaquin kept telling him when they spoke, and it was beginning to weigh heavy on him. What would he do when Aruba was over? Would Joaquin ever have him back? "Love, you're lost in thought. Let's go swimming." Jade broke through his reverie, and he put his arm around her as they made their way out onto the sand. "Let's walk down the beach a little. I think there's a cove not too far from here," she said excitedly. "We can play there." She laughed, running ahead of him. He loved to see her happy and carefree like this. The sun was glistening off her wet skin as she jumped into the waves and then ran back up onto the beach to tease him, coaxing him down the beach towards the little cove she had read about online. The beach was more populated than usual today, and it wasn't lost on some of the vacationers that someone famous was staying at the hotel. The paparazzi that had landed on the island earlier that day had already set up camp in secluded areas around the hotel, hoping to catch that one shot that would land them on the cover of some entertainment magazine or social media site. Today, they would not be disappointed, as Jade Monroe was out for attention, and that was what she was going to get. It didn't matter at what cost or who might get hurt in the aftermath. She wanted to show everyone that she was in control and could do whatever she wanted. Word got around that Jade was out on the beach and with some guy, and those that were interested pulled out their cell phones and cameras to have them handy just in case. As Jade enticed Alejandro closer to the cove, she knew she was being watched. She didn't care. She wanted it all. The attention, the surprise, the admonition of those who thought they might know better than her. Bring it on, baby, was the feeling in her mind right now. She reached the cove ahead of Alejandro and peeled off her swimsuit, exposing all of herself. "For goodness sake, what are you doing now?" he said, clearly turned on, but also concerned for her. What was she doing? He knew she was uninhibited, but this was out in the open in broad daylight. He was usually supposed to protect her in situations such as this. "Don't worry, hun. They said this is a very private cove and no one's here." She lied, knowing that she had read that this area was popular. She moved closer to him, and as she did, he pulled her close. "You know I can't deny myself," he said, murmuring something in Spanish that she couldn't understand. She wasn't entirely without feeling the same for him, but this time she had a hidden agenda, and something inside her caught in her stomach, and for a split second she felt bad using him like this. But she wanted to send a message, and this was the way to do it. She flipped her long red hair over her shoulder and purposely looked up towards the top of the cove. He pulled her down onto the sand and looked deeply into her eyes. He let himself get lost in her, running his hands up and down her body. His hands felt familiar and knowing of her every whim. She let him move her on top of him. She could feel the sweat under her breasts and between her legs. He moved into her and she moved on top of him as he guided her body. She could feel her energy rising up from that place within her where the magic always happened. She let herself go and they came together in a sweaty rush of ecstasy. She sat up on top of him and looked back at the top of the cove. If that doesn't get on the front page, nothing will, she thought, wiping the sweat from her forehead and bending down to kiss him deeply on the lips, again feeling that tinge of hurt when she looked into his eyes. And she was right. The guys behind the mega telescopic lenses at the top of the cove got a little more than they had imagined, and it would be both a media payday and something they would never forget. As Jade and Alejandro were getting dressed, the paparazzi were hurrying to get their photos developed and off to anyone who would pay the highest price. At the Tahoe Hard Rock, Rob was up on stage in an impromptu jam session with the resident band. Word got out. Word up. Word got out quickly, and lucky and adoring fans lined up outside the now filled to capacity venue to catch a glimpse of one of their favorite stars. Tamara and Megan waited at the side stage, hoping that they would still get to hang out after the show. Rob and Steele had chatted with the band before the show, and the idea for the jam session had formed. The alcohol had been flowing backstage, and everyone was partaking, including Rob, who was making up for quenching his last buzz with too much of the hangover burger. He didn't usually need to drink to get on stage, but there was something about the feeling of the lights and the music when he had just a slight buzz, and he found that more often than not lately, he was having a drink before each show. It also helped him afterward. Here we go with the world again. It also helped him afterward. When girls wanted to stick around and talk to him, he was usually much more eloquent with them feeling like this. The session was amazing, as quoted by many on Instagram and Facebook, and Rob and Steele were seen leaving with Megan and Tamara for the band's after party at Steele's ski chalet. Rob spent time at the party downing shots with the boys and eyeing all the girls who had either been invited or snuck in by bribing someone. The music was loud and the place was crowded and smoky. He needed some air, he thought, as he made his way outside onto the deck with a whiskey in one hand. He sat down and pulled out his phone to surf the web a little bit before going back inside. He noticed his Twitter feed had blown up with all sorts of posts about Jade Monroe. He clicked a link in one of the tweets and he sat staring at his phone, unprepared for the picture he was looking at. He didn't know if he was more taken aback by the picture itself of a naked Jade making love on the beach, or the fact that at that moment he felt two things: rage and utter disappointment in himself. These feelings became intensified by the whiskey, and he stood up, letting his phone drop to the floor. He didn't know what to feel, so he decided not to feel anything. "I've got to get out of here," he thought to himself, looking around for Steele, who was talking to the band. "Hey, buddy, let me see your keys. I left something in the car," he told Steele, not letting on about the true nature of his request. Steele, too engrossed in a conversation about drum kits, fished the Porsche keys out of his pocket and handed them to Rob. Rob went to the bar and downed a shot of tequila and then double-stepped it to the car. Opening the door, he folded himself into the driver's side and started the engine. He had to get away from it all. The feelings for Jade that he didn't understand, the media attention, the girls who only wanted to screw him. He wanted it all to disappear. He maneuvered the Porsche out of the entrance of the chalet and onto the slick mountain road, and he revved it up as he took off down the mountain pass. First gear, second, third. He shifted the swift little car down the pass. He downshifted to get around a hairpin curve and switched the music on to full blast. This felt good, he thought to himself a little hazily. He almost never drove anymore because he was usually too tipsy to handle the Hollywood traffic, but he was out here on the open roads with no traffic, no one to tell him that he needed to mind his behavior. To hell with them all. He didn't need anyone. He had been on his own since he was a child, and no one was going to tell him how to live his life. He shifted into fourth gear now as he picked up the speed to 60 miles per hour. No one was going to hurt his heart as his parents had done so long ago. 70 miles per hour now, and not even Jade Monroe could make him love ever again. At the thought of Jade, he pushed down harder on the accelerator. 80 now. What was she doing out there on the beach with some guy, he thought? That guy should have been me. I should have been with Jade, not him. I'll make them all pay. The thoughts came without reason as he pushed the Porsche to go faster. Just then, an unexpected turn with flashing yellow lights came into view. He tried to downshift and hit the brakes while maneuvering the Porsche into it, but the amount of alcohol in his body, the speed, and the slick road wouldn't have it. The Porsche groaned as it tried to lean into the turn. Wheels skidded on wet pavement, and Rob overcorrected on the curve, causing the little car to lose traction. And then he was spinning and rolling as the car flipped several times and landed on the passenger side. It stopped with wheels up in the air and spinning as Rob's mind went to the picture of Jade on the beach just before he passed out. Get ready, friends, as the final chapters will be coming next. The next drop. What's going to happen to Rob? What's going to happen to Jade and Alejandro? Get so excited. All right, catch y'all in the next chapters, the final chapters.